Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L here to talk about My Hero Academia chapter 376. Hey, it's a really short chapter, we shouldn't be here that long. It is coming out on, what day is it? It is a Wednesday. Awesome. Yeah, it came out really late because I actually forgot about the chapter. It was a busy holiday weekend. But we're here now. I've also made the spoiler video. It probably came up together with this chapter. Yeah, let's just get into it. On the screen, you can kind of see the color page. I just have it here, just easier to talk about it. You can see who the top 10 are. So, like, overall, the results for the popularity poll, they aren't that surprising. We're seeing a lot of the common mainstays here. Bako number 1, Izuku number 2, Shoto number 3. Solid. I think Endeavor was number 4 and Ida number 5. I think that's a pretty solid top 5. Ida's been in the top 10 like very often, so this makes sense. Yeah, the biggest surprise here is honestly Kaminari. Kaminari comes in there. I have to assume that it's because of the Jiro moment. I think that's why Kaminari got the boost. It's because of shipping. But otherwise, yeah, no. This is a pretty solid top 10. You know, to speak to one of the commenters, Kayla. You can notice that a few people have green capes. In this case, Izuku, Shoto, Ida, Aizawa, and Ochako. I think that's a pretty neat little touch. Kind of would have liked to see other people with the green capes, but like the other people in the shot aren't associated with Izuku. A lot of them are independent. Like Kirishima is more associated with Bakugo, so they kind of have more similar motifs. And then if you look at the black guard kind of thing, Hawks and Endeavor have more of the black on them, and then Aizawa has some black on him, like probably indicating like indicating the pro hero role and also the teacher role through the green cape. Anyway, I think it's a pretty neat color page, and it's always nice to see the alternate universe here. Anyway, I gotta switch over from this one. Alright, had to switch over for that just to make it easier to be able to show you guys the images that matter. Okay, so we begin Hero Academia. We're starting on page 3 of the Viz Media translation. So, 376 on Knife's Edge. This page is pretty useless, other than to like remind us where we are. We have the whole massive twice, and we see one of the twices turning back to look at Ochako and Suyu as they fall. Nothing really important there. You're not really getting anything. Like, the payoff for that page is really on page 4 or 5, where you have Toga saying that she's not some blushing schoolgirl in love anymore. You got that hero. It's like, bro, listen, you're so psychotic that I could see you like just flipping between the two states back and forth. Like, okay, you tell me, is mental stability something that you associate with Toga? I don't think so. So like that's why this is just ridiculous. And like at the end of the day, you know, like Ochako's gonna break through to her because like Ochako's like a therapist in the making, which Japan needs. So that it's not like it's a bad thing. Oh yeah, but no, page 4 and 5 is a lot more special for other reasons. So let's look at this crowd of twice, right? It's a pretty big crowd, looks pretty scary, people are being swallowed up by the twices, but remember, twices, the more you produce them, the less durable they become. So, you can make a crowd of twice, but like as long as you get the first hit in, these guys will go down pretty quickly. Anyway, this scene, you see that Pixie Bob is there, she's using her earth. Honestly, if she were to drown the twices, a lot of this would be a lot easier. But let's move on to the more important parts. First, Shroom Girl. Shroom Girl is really interesting, narratively, because the author didn't need to tell us she was there. The thing here is, he brought her up last chapter, or like in the last 2 chapters, telling us that she was here. I think that was the first time we got the confirmation, but apologies if I'm wrong there. Right? And then in this chapter, she's saying, I can't spread my spores with all this fire. So, the thing here is, this line is really critical because Shroom Girl counters twice. It's a hard counter to twice because she just produces the spores. They get in through his mask and she just chokes them out. So they have to kind of like set this up that, yeah, no. She's not going to be the one making the situation better in any quick state. Like, she might be able to do it so later, but like first you're going to get some tension out. Now, the other thing here with Shroom Girl is, again, like, he didn't need to bring her up, but I think he likes the design. So I think Shroom Girl will get a moment of some kind, I think. Just a nice moment where she chokes someone out, probably with the shrooms. But yeah, this whole thing, he establishes there, that indicates a moment coming. He establishes she can't do anything right now, which indicates that she can't deal with the tension here. But like, given that she's here in general, there must be something for her, right? That's the idea. One thing I will say is that the logic, I don't think, makes sense to me, because it's raining and there's fire. I feel like she can spread the shrooms elsewhere where there is no fire, because like Dobby's gonna be more or less contained, mind you. Likely, the author is gonna have Dobby like really create bigger fires to be able to justify her not being involved. But you know, it's like the thing is like the author did the due diligence to say like she's not gonna be viable, guys. So it's like accepted, but it's like you know, I kind of wish this was better depicted, so at least I could like support it better. But yeah. Next critical panel is Shishido saying, "Get the tied up villains out of here, or else they're gonna burn to a crisp." I want to show you that they caught a high-end Nomu, or sorry, like one of the near high-ends. They caught one of the near high-end Nomus. I want you to see this crowd, right? The heroes were outgunned, and yet they are in a situation where they can say, we have to move the tied up villains away from the other villains. Think about the amount of power you need to be able to have, the amount of comfort you need to be able to still acknowledge like heroic ideals such as not getting the villains killed. Really think about that. The reality is, the heroes, like the average hero is probably much better trained than the average villain, right? The fact that they caught a high-end Nomu without Endeavor's involvement, bro. So the thing here is that the Twices look scary, but this isn't the Liberation War, right? This isn't like, you know, League of Villains versus Liberation Army or blah blah blah. This is heroes versus villains, and given their ability with being able to sequester villains in general with low numbers, if you give the right heroes the right amount of time, the Twices, like this whole crowd of Twices, will be wiped out by the logic that justifies them being able to tie up so many villains. Now, mind you, one of the big things here is that the villains being tied up and needing to be moved occupies some heroes, which might give the Twices more time. But at this point, the Twices are in trouble because there's no crimes against humanity occurring here when you look at clones of a dead man. These guys are clones. They're not real. There's no consideration you need to take in this particular case. Like if the heroes realize that there is no moral conundrum here, and they just start murking the Twices, I don't think anyone's gonna like bat an eye. And I think things are gonna get much easier. I think like a lot of not villains. I think a lot of heroes are gonna enjoy the stress relief of just wiping out like a villain and seeing him like turn into goo. Yeah, no, there's not really any ethical concerns here. Wiping out a clone, like some people can say, oh, there's tons of ethical concerns because it's still like a copy of someone, but it's like, nah, man, not really. Not really. There is no ethical concerns here. Like the series doesn't say there's any ethical concerns. Clones have been wiped out left, right, and center since the beginning of the series. Anyway, point is, the heroes can go all out here, and given their capabilities, a small amount of heroes should be able to wipe out the entirety of the Twices, just by the logic of them being able to capture as many villains as they did. There's no world where they can capture a near high-end Nomu and they can't deal with a giant crowd of Twices coming at them, especially when all the Twices have diminishing durability. Okay, on page 6, we have people rejoining, that being Tokoyami and Jiro. I'm really still hoping that Tokoyami gets something. Like, people keep saying, like, well, it's getting darker, so Tokoyami's going to become much more useful. Well, the thing is, like, the flames are still there, and you have to remember that Dark Shadow is weak to even flashes of light, because we've seen that before. But Dark Shadow's there. He's not kind of evolving right now. He still actually looks a little bit sad when you see him in the shot with Tokoyami. So, you know, I'm hoping for more. I want to see Tokoyami like come face to face with the Demon Lord and tell the Demon Lord that he's actually the real Demon Lord, he being Tokoyami. But we'll have to see. Anyway, you have Jiro acknowledging All For One as the Demon Lord, really goofy. And then you have the actual critical panel of Jiro saying, since the Twice army came out of the same warp gate as you two, I'm guessing that's actually Toga. So, this is actually a really loaded statement because it confirms that even the kids knew that Toga could copy people's quirks. Because her being able to make that giant jump and not be surprised by it and just be like, okay, this is probably what happened. Everyone knew. This was an open secret. Everyone knew. The only people that didn't know whether the kids knew was us, right? So there we go. All of Japan will be buried unless we stop her here. That's true. That's true. Unless you stop Toga, like she's gonna keep producing them. But like there's a good chance that you're gonna be able to stop them once it's not important anymore. What I'm actually imagining is gonna happen is that once the focus leaves Toga, it's just like the cleanup of the Twices is just gonna be like kind of, you know, it's just gonna be what's the word? there's a word for it. It's just gonna be a routine, not routine, but like there's a word that just said a formality. The cleanup of the twice is gonna be a formality once the narrative focus isn't on them. Okay, we also have the author establishing Dobby's raging heat is far too fierce. Toga keeps multiplying despite the fire, so all we can do is flee. So there's a little bit of a trick going on here, because you have two dangerous forces, Dobby's heat and Toga's multiplying. The critical line here is Toga keeps multiplying despite the fire. So what the author's trying to do is try to establish that there's two viable sources of problems here. The thing is, though, the durability of the twices, Toga cannot fundamentally interact with the fire. So at some point, if Horikoshi is saying that this place is as chaotic as it looks, the twice clones should be affected by the fire when it spreads. Because what Tokoyami is indicating is that she's multiplying without care, or like without seeming care for the fire. So it's really just that this is one of those dialogue lines that's just there to establish the chaoticness of the battlefield, and him showing where the fire is in the background of the shots is just trying to like show like, yeah, you know, this is why this is going to be relatively hard. That rain, though, the rain is such a critical little thing here. I'm not assuming that the rain's going to be able to put out all the fire, but like the rain should be weakening a lot of people's fire, unless like it's about to become some big moment where these guys are able to evaporate the like the clouds themselves or something like that. We'll have to see. We go into page 7, which is a really good page in general. We find out this strategy to divide and conquer has failed. Don't worry about that. We know Plan B is still a thing, so the heroes still have a shot here. We have Dobby acknowledging that he didn't get to get his best dream, and what I pointed out to people on live stream is that this is who Dobby is. When he fails, he just kind of like makes the best of a bad situation. I think Dobby make the best of a bad situation is his motto. That's his way of life. He looks pretty good here. Endeavor's able to figure some stuff out. Pretty much, we're going to see like a really just brutal fight. I still hope that we get cut-ins from the Todoroki family, because they need to be involved in the spirit of this fight. And I think, given Horikoshi's style, that's what we're going to get. We'll have to see. It's just like the Todoroki family has way too much force behind them. They're like the most important family in Hero Academia. Okay, we go into page 8. We have All For One's monologue of him saying, "The wind now blows my way, cascading chains of events. They're all working in my favor." Okay, so that first line, this is just like returning to the metaphor that All For One has established for himself. Not really that critical. The interesting line is, Kurogiri probably warped himself to tomorrow's location. Optimally, I would have obtained that long-range warp quirk for myself, since it's superior to my imperfect sludge warp. And we know which one it's talking about, like the one that makes him vomit, or people vomit sludge. Now, one of the things about Horikoshi is that he never defined this quirk, and that's really good for him because he never got locked into this to that quirk's capabilities or rules, so he can use it however he wants to. It's a pretty cheap technique, but it's an effective technique. Sometimes you don't want to give away all the details so that you can just use it when it's convenient and not when it makes sense. And like the readers won't know that it doesn't make sense because you won't tell them how it works, right? That's one of the values of keeping things vague. Anyway, All For One establishes he wants to get to Shigaraki, alright? Now, people are making fun of this whole Kurogiri line about him being able to take Kurogiri's quirk. I have to assume that there was some kind of weird condition justifying why All For One couldn't take Kurogiri's quirk before, or he didn't want to. I'm going to assume it's because his body was just unhealthy and he couldn't handle any more quirks, and he only takes quirks out of desperation if he needs to. That's what I'm going to assume. It's just the easiest thing to justify why he hadn't done this. Like, honestly, I think the Kurogiri quirk is so useful that if you can copy it with the Doctor's tech, I would have put it inside of him, like, very, very early on, but, like, whatever. You know, the Doctor and All For One, they don't tell us the limits and the struggles that they face all the time with what they're doing, with their shenanigans. To this day, I still want to know how exactly they figured out the science of hatred. But, you know, it's just one of those points. It just makes All For One look a little bit silly because you have to put in that extra reasoning of, like, he must have been, like, weakened. And you just kind of wish that this was better explained. But I think, like, the author doesn't explain it because he needs like the flexibility to be able to change things on the fly later on. We go into page 9, which I think is the start of a really good sequence, where we see Hawks getting in the way of All For One and getting like headbutt out of the way. One of the critical lines here is Hawk saying, "We now know that the rewind effect puts you on a timer." Oh, sorry, we know that the rewind effect puts you on a timer. So the critical thing here is that he's able to call it the rewind effect. You know, he's specifically noting the name of the quirk, which makes it seem like he knows more about it, and they know he's on a timer. The real question is, do they know that hurting All For One might lengthen the timer? I don't know. I don't know if they know that. They might not, but they know the name of the rewind effect. So this is going to be one of those things you kind of have to just wait and see. There might be like a weird stipulation that if you cut off All For One's head, rewind can't do anything about it. But like, I don't know. I don't know how rewind works in this kind of situation. So the author again has a lot of control on what he can do here. There's still so much we don't know about how rewind interacts with a person's full history. Like, we don't know what's going to happen to the quirks he collected. We don't know if the quirks are always there or if they like come into existence and disappear. We just don't know. Okay. Then we get the very critical line of All For One saying, "In the truest sense, that body is not yet complete. There's a reason why this version of me is still essential." So I mentioned a lot of things, and I think this is a really nice line. But I'm going to give you options in terms of the interpretation, right? One of the interpretations is that when he says version of me, he means just generally this physical All For One. One thing that you can see here is that by him calling himself the version of me and not like the original me, the version of me, it makes it seem like he's okay with the idea of dying, and I'll talk more about that in a second. The other interpretation is that version of me refers to the young All For One in particular, but like that doesn't make sense. It can't be that because like All For One didn't know if he was going to survive rewind. So I think it has to be just generally physical All For One. And in terms of what I think he's going to do, I think the completion of that body happens after Shigaraki kills All For One himself. Like, make it some like big, "Oh bro, shit, you killed me, you gave into your hatred, you killed me, and now that has been like that has sealed your fate." You know, like, he is so bombastic. He can come up with a really nice series of lines to like make that moment seem like really critical. Anyway, the point is, if we get to any moment where it looks like Shigaraki's about to kill original All For One, just be ready. Be ready for like this guy to just take over fully. Because like in the next chapter, oh actually I can't talk about the next chapter. All right. Well, if you saw the next chapter spoilers, you can probably figure out what I was about to say. Anyway, page 10. We have again confirmation that Divide and Conquer was a bust. We find out that the Allies can't battle in the nasty heat. Okay, so that's just another justification for why the battlefield is going to be shifting into a way that kind of singles these people out. And if we fall here, the villains are going to converge on Izuku and Tomura. That's a fair point. Although, if a Twice clone happened to get through the Kurogiri barrier, then they're going to converge on Izuku and Tomura no matter what. Okay. Hawks asked to put a stop to Dobby. That's fine. Now, what happens next is a lot of rhetorical justification for what's about to go down. Now, let's just read All For One's dialogue so we can again remind ourselves of how bombastic All For One is. Like, we know how he speaks. He speaks with a lot of like big words and dramatic words. Such a cruel command for that one-armed, half-conscious fellow, right? You can see the niceties in there. You can see the veneer of like trying to be someone that he's not, trying to be a gentleman. As you so nicely put it, again, the nicely. This is again, I love breaking down All For One's dialogue because it is kind of purple prose. Like, he's very bombastic, and it's just very nice to always seeing it. As you so nicely put it, defeating me post haste. Wow, again, post haste, a big fancy word, is his mission here. Yet you tell him to abandon his duty. Abandon, another really strong word. Duty is also a very loaded, powerful word. Again, you can study All For One's dialogue in general if you were writing stories, just to see, because like, if there's one thing that Horikoshi has been very good with, it's been All For One's dialogue. If you get 10 characters talking and you just like show me like their dialogue boxes and the dialogue that they're saying, I'm sure most of the time you can pick out who exactly is All For One out of the dialogue boxes. And that's just because of how distinct his particular style of speech is in English. I assume that there must be some kind of weird quirk going on in the Japanese for the English to be able to come out this nicely and this consistent across all of the chapters. Horikoshi's dialogue writing has always been one of his strongest assets. And that's why Hero Academia ends up being so good to analyze because he packs so much into his dialogue that even little turns of phrases becomes really important. The unfortunate thing, though, of course, is that the translation from Japanese to English takes away a lot of the finesse that he has with his dialogue. So what we're saying here, Nick, it's not just Horikoshi, but it's also the translator's interpretation of Horikoshi. And like at some points, it kind of falls apart because some things aren't perfectly translated. But like also props to the translator because it takes two to tango in this particular situation with the dialogue. But like All For One's dialogue has always been superb in terms of consistency. I don't think anyone can take away All For One's consistency with his dialogue, and that's 100% credit to Horikoshi. Probably the best dialogue writer in modern Shonen Jump. I'd have to look at the other series to see who exactly wins out, but like I can tell you like who doesn't win out like immediately. Definitely not One Piece and definitely not Black Clover. But yeah, no, Horikoshi best dialogue writer. We go into page 10 where we get another critical line. After all, you're already lost to our number one. So the big thing here, aside from Hawks calling calling All For One's nonsense bullcrap, is that what is happening here is that, yeah, Hawks is technically right. All For One had to go into a desperate measure to enter round 2, but like Endeavor won round 1. He might, he won the battle. He might lose the war, but Endeavor won round 1. You don't get to be a charred piece of nothing and say you won that fight. Like you had a contingency that got you into like round 2, but yeah, no, Hawks says that All For One already lost once. I kind of agree. All For One, like right now, All Might and Endeavor are essentially equivalent when it comes to their their All For One fights, because like All Might beat All For One, and All For One like revived himself, and now Endeavor beat All For One, and All For One revived himself. Like, yeah, no, like the argument is there. If the author is saying like, guys, that's it, Endeavor won his fight against All For One, we're moving on to the Dobby stuff, and Endeavor's not going to really touch All For One anymore. If he tells me to accept that, yeah, I'll accept it. I think he did enough work. Yeah, no, 100%. All For One says splitting hairs, I see, but this is also from like, I fall backwards on a banana peel and I still, like, it was all part of my plan, All For One. That's who he is. This is the kind of guy that even if he loses, he says that it's all within his plan, right? This guy hates to admit that he's failing, right? So, of course, he would get a little bit annoyed by that. I love that we see him getting annoyed. And then we have finally Dobby approaching Endeavor, and Endeavor saying that he's really seeing Toya this time around. I really think the Endeavor Dobby stuff, there's going to be a hug in there somewhere. It's going to happen. Like, Endeavor's just going to take this guy on, and he's just going to hug him. Like, that poor kid just wants a hug. So we'll see what goes down here. I do think, like, Dobby still self-destructs, but we'll have to see who goes down. Endeavor's face on this panel, though, awesome. Like, a really nicely drawn image of Endeavor. He deserves to be in top 5 of the popularity poll. Anyway, guys, that's it for chapter 376. It was a short chapter, but I would say don't be upset about it, man. It's Christmas. The guy was sick. Was so sick they had to stop publication for 1 week, or serialization of the series for 1 week. This is probably one of the chapters that he made in recovery, or right when he was getting sick. Just we all wanted to stay alive. We already had we know what happens when an author dies, especially in recent memory with Berserk. We don't want that. So, whenever someone gets upset that there's only 11 chapters of a series that you can probably consume for free, just remember that the author's sick and needs to recover. And keep that in mind for the next chapter, too, because the next chapter has only like 11 pages. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. That was my review. 25 minutes. If it was a longer chapter, we would have gone for 40. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.